Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. Before we get in it with my friend and my colleague here, I want to thank Claude Allen for becoming a new channel member. I really appreciate it. He became a channel member before the show even started, so we really appreciate that. Now, without further ado, my guy,
Hey,
Matthew. What's up, Matthew?
oh, not much, man. I'm always pleased to be with you, Rasheed.
Hey, Matthew, I want to read something to you, okay? This,
Yeah.
where is it at? Let me pull this up. Um, Yesterday, there was a write up by Mr. I Love War, so long as I don't have to fight in it, Lindsey Graham, and
Mm.
uh, the Sputnik reported that U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham introduces bill authorizing military force in Iran. And I'm going to read the first part of it for you, and I want to get your assessment on it because what's crazy about this is he acts as if he acts as if Iran assassinated a leader in Tel Aviv, not the other way around. And he's acting as if Iran is being belligerent and not the U.S. and Israel. So I want to read a little bit of this, but this is only in Bizarro World that we see this stuff. So
Mm.
it says
Mm.
after the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran on Wednesday, Iran promised a harsh punishment for Israel. On Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin declared that the United States was ready to defend Israel in the event of an attack by Iran. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham introduced legislation right before the Congress recess in August that would authorize President Joe Biden to use military force um, against Iran if it determines, here's the crazy thing, that Iran has capabilities that threaten the U.S. the national security interest, not the national security of the United States, but the national security interests of the
Hmm.
United States. Now, and he has two or three things down here that he specifies. But why is it that the West there's no outcry of violation of international law? There's no outcry of right to protect. The same thing the United States
Right.
used when they intervened in Libya. But
Yeah.
why are they demonizing the victim and victimizing the demon?
Ooh, that's a well framed question. It's loaded, eh? I mean, I guess the answer is kind of implicit in sort of what we all know about. Well, one, the way you frame the question sort of has the answer embedded within it in a certain level. We've been conditioned to, I think, just have our the norms and the standards of what we should come to expect just increase to the point that at this moment it's 1984. It's the inverse game, right? Up is down and freedom is slavery and peace is war. So that's weird. And but at the same time, you did have people 20 years ago up in arms when there was a very clear motion to bomb Iraq. We had protests all over the world. I know we had hundreds of thousands of people marching on the streets of Europe, of Canada, of all over the U.S. saying no. Now it didn't actually end up working because the unitary executive ideologues that came in at the time under the neocons and Dick Cheney and the like, they don't care about democracy at all. It's the unitary executive authorization of Carl Schmitt, the Nazi crown jurist, that justified their perception of how power should be used and wielded. These are a bunch of Straussians that took over through the project of a new American century, which Lindsey Graham has been enmeshed with from the get-go, which always saw since the 90s, since they killed really Yitzhak Rabin and then killed Arafat. They were always gunning for bombing Iran, and that was on the wish list way back in 1997 regarding the clean break doctrine that people should never forget about. That was clearly drafted by the neocons as part of the project for a new American century that was given and delivered to Benjamin Netanyahu to carry out a securing of the realm, basically an expansion of greater Israel, with a high focus on the need to do regime change in Iran, nominally to secure Israel's borders, but not really. It's to expand the damn thing and to create more enemies because Israel was on a very good track towards actually getting some security under Yitzhak Rabin and the two-state solution that he and Yasser Arafat had done a lot of work to try to negotiate, that's a viable way to have Israel survive and thrive with its allies. But they had to kill those people who were negotiating that and making it happen. So the neocons, the thing about this ideology is again, they say a lot about needing to spread and defend democracy and freedom around the world, but they don't believe in it themselves. Those high-level people around Karl Rove, around Rumsfeld, who's long deceased now, but all of these creatures who are still there and their ideology is still very active. They, like I was going to say, they follow the theories of Nazi crown jurist. I just said his name and I forgot it now. Karl Schmidt.
Karl Rove and Karl Schmidt.
No, Karl. Yeah, Schmidt. And that's what was used by Hitler to justify the enabling acts after the Reichstag fire. Was the idea that the leader of a state in a time of crisis has to use authoritarian power, and that the population have to be lied to in order to get them to consent to things that are actually against their own self-interest, which was what was applied to getting the German people to support the idea of invading Poland. You know, they were given propaganda that there's poor Germans being abused by the evil Polish government. We have to go save our German brethren who are like living in Poland. And it was always a lie, and the people manufacturing it always knew it was a lie. And it's the same thing regarding what they did after 9/11, another Reichstag fire inside job. You know, to based on the idea that we need to not only get revenge but also liberate people in far off lands, which became saving people from Gaddafi, saving people from Saddam Hussein. So we had to bomb these people back to the Stone Age to save them. And many of these creatures have been saying the same thing about we need to save the Iranians from the authoritarian Iranian regime. But the reality is that Iran is a linchpin for peace. If you actually look at what Iran has been able to provide as far as a stabilizing force that unites Russia, China, increasingly also India. They've been able to rebuild diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It's really, really important that Iran remain not only intact but thrive, and that's what's intolerable to the oligarchs who are managing the neocons. And yeah, they're going for it now. They're frothing it now.
You know, going back to the early '80s and the late '90s, you remember Dick Cheney says anyone can go to Baghdad, but real men go to Tehran. And so they wanted the neocons have been looking for this for the longest to really bomb Iran, because a lot of people don't understand that Iran is strategically placed. It is just like Afghanistan. It is full of untapped resources, and it's a huge country, and it's in the underbelly of Russia, China, and India. And this is the main thing. And with them controlling Iran, if they were able to subdue Iran, they could control the pipelines and distribute the resources there to Europe and to their allies, which could cement dollar supremacy for another 100 years or so. And I think this is one of the main reasons why they're after Iran. I want to play something real quick, and then after I play this short video, I want your take on it. This is at the United Nations. This is Iran vowing retaliation for the blatant act of war that was committed on it by Israel and the United States. Let's not forget. Let's not play like the United States did not have refueling tankers or did not allow Israel to use 1/3 of Syrian airspace and then Iraqi airspace or whatever. Let's not act like the United States did not have a part in this with the intelligence. So I want to play this real quick.
This act could not be occurred without the authorization and intelligence support of the U.S. The Islamic Republic of Iran reserves its inherent right to self-defense in accordance with international law to respond decisively to this terrorist and criminal act when it deems necessary and appropriate.
Those are just a few of the many strong words that Iran had for Israel at this emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. It was a meeting that was called by Iran and supported by Russia, China, and Algeria to address the recent Israeli assassination of Hamas's political chief Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian territory. This is something that Russia said completely undermined the possibility of a resolution to the Palestinian conflict through negotiations, and Russia also said that this has sparked the possibility of a larger regional war with Iran.
Russia strongly condemns the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh following a missile strike on his residence in Tehran. This is a serious blow, first of all, to negotiations between Hamas and Israel on the ceasefire in Gaza, in which Ismail Haniyeh was a direct participant.
For its part, Israel laid the blame on the very same country whose territorial integrity it just violated, Iran, claiming that the assassination of Haniyeh was somehow an act of self-defense. On top of that, Tel Aviv accused Tehran of being hell-bent on Israel's destruction and its Lebanese ally Hezbollah of killing children in the Golan Heights.
The State of Israel will not stand idly by. We will continue to defend ourselves and our citizens. While this council perverts its mission prosecuting Israel as we defend our people, the Ayatollahs in Iran are formulating strategies to wipe Israel and the Jewish people from the face of the earth.
The meeting didn't only cover Israel's strike in Iran, though. In response to the attack on Golan Heights that Hezbollah denies carrying out altogether, Tel Aviv struck Beirut, killing a Hezbollah leader and an Iranian military advisor. Lebanon's representative said that this was a clear violation of international law.
The message is bloody, clear and explicit. The culprit is the government of Israel and its prime minister. The victim is ceasefire resolution.
Of course, Palestine also had the chance to once again appeal to the international community to hold Israel accountable for its actions. Palestine's representative said that Tel Aviv has no red lines, and Israeli politicians feel that they will face no consequences for their actions.
The failure to hold Israel accountable has permitted and enabled these crimes and further emboldened Israeli government officials, military commanders, and settler extremists to escalate their reign of terror against defenseless Palestinian civilians. There is no red line for Israel, no law it will not breach, no norm it will not trample, no act too depraved or barbaric for its occupying army and settler militias.
Once again, the U.S. took up its usual position: unconditional support for Israel's so-called right to defend itself and laying the blame on Iran for any and all killing associated with the Palestine conflict. But when it comes to Israel, once again, American eyes were closed to any and all wrongdoing on Tel Aviv's part.
So I see a lot of people are starting to pick up on some of the stuff that I talked about right when this took place. I felt that was either a false flag by Israel or that Israel was the culprit in the killing of the so-called civilians. And then I pointed out that that's the Golan Heights. Israel said it will continue to defend its people. That is occupied Syrian territory.
Yeah,
and those people who were killed were Syrian citizens, not Israeli citizens.
Yeah.
Those were Syrian citizens.
Yeah, it was a dominant. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
According to international law, you have the right to armed resistance if you are being occupied or suppressed by a government. So now, when we know that, how can Israel even claim the right to self-defense when you have the right to armed struggle when you're being occupied? And if that is not Israeli territory and it is Syrian territory and it is recognized by everybody but the United States that that is Syrian territory, how could anybody, the United States or Israel, justify self-defense when they are the occupiers of that territory and the citizens who were killed were not Israeli citizens but Syrian citizens?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. The level of hypocrisy is just outstanding, and it's just real make-believe at a certain point. And on top of that, the community that was struck was a predominantly Druze community. I mean, these are not even Jews per se. Like you said, there's so many layers of hypocrisy here, and it does smell of an inside job. It doesn't. There's no strategic value for Hezbollah to have made that decision to launch any type of an attack onto a Syrian territory occupied mostly by Druze citizens. And no, it smells. And Hezbollah denied it as well. They said absolutely, we have nothing to do with this. So that's dirty. And I think that there's a faction of end times cultists who have taken power of Israel, who don't represent the interests of the Israeli people, and they're gunning for it. They've got the red heifers. They ship them in. They're waiting to slaughter them on their big sacrificial altar. They're itching to blow up the dome on the rock, and they're itching to start building up. They already have all of the chess pieces for the priests of Solomon's third temple. They already have it all made out of gold, all of the altar pieces, the staffs, the robes. They have it all. They're just waiting to build the temple now, which they think also involves needing to blow up what's currently sitting there as far as the Holy of Holies. Which is, that's like Armageddon shit that they're actually fanatically thinking about. So they've been trying to provoke some form of escalation now for a long time, and really even before October 7th, it was already quite bad, but there was some hope for some sanity. We had the Chinese, we had the Russians doing a lot of heavy negotiation to try to convince the Israelis that it's better to build infrastructure and to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese were going in there, building rail lines, high-speed rail lines that they were offering into Israel. They were looking at sanitation infrastructure for in the Gaza that would have created a lot of large-scale, high-quality work. So things had a potential for a sane adult dialogue. But then you had that other inside job of October 7th, and I've seen enough evidence. I think you have too. I think the audience is pretty informed that there was not only pre-knowledge weeks before that was going to happen on that day in that location, but I would say even collusion to manufacture that thing that I think even, which is troubling for one specific reason for me. And I don't know what Ismail Haniyeh's position was within that trap. I don't know whether he, being a multi-billionaire Qatar-based leader of Hamas, I don't know to what degree he was colluding with the Israelis to throw his own people under the bus, because Hamas is still, it's the political representation of the people of Gaza, but at the same time, it's gotten a vast amount of patronage and support going back to, as far as I could see, its creation in the late 80s, stemming out of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it was designed to destroy the dialogue process of Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin and the sane factions of both sides, who were really working for concrete problem solving of these multi-generational problems. And so it was designed, it was incubated by, as Ron Paul and Chaz Freeman and many others have described pretty eloquently, by Anglo-Israeli intelligence for a very long time. Benjamin Netanyahu openly gave speeches to his cabinet on several occasions, saying that if we really want to maintain control over Gaza, we have to do everything to continue to support Hamas, because they like the idea of a more radical, religiously oriented opposition group there that would justify at some point their incursion and invasion into that region, which a level-headed grouping would not tend to fall into reactionary violence, or wouldn't be provoked as easily as a more fundamentalist agency. Now, this guy Haniyeh, how did he become a multi-billionaire? How did he? I think the last time I checked before, because this is the guy who got killed in Iran. I don't know how he became a multi-billionaire. I don't know a lot of things. I do get a sense, though, that he was not necessarily for a long time a very honest peace broker. I get the sense that if this was a pre-planned October 7th operation, that it would have involved, again, some collusion between figures within high-level Hamas who disposed of lower-level Hamas people who didn't even know what was going on when they were told to do certain things, that was never, kidnap certain high-level targets or something, and then they found themselves in a position that they didn't understand, being attacked by just walking into a trap. And then that triggered a whole set of genies out of bottles that you couldn't put back in the bottles at that point. Everything kind of just spun out of control. Now, the Chinese have done some remarkable diplomatic miracles all around the world in terms of brokering impossible things, like the peace between the Saudis and the Yemenis. negotiating to convince the Saudis that it's better to have a future by embracing large-scale development, joining up with the BRICS. They basically made an offer you couldn't refuse. That rather than continuing to be a satrap for the U.S., where you only have one thing, oil, to make money, and otherwise those riches are used to sponsor, Wahhabite Islamicists in different parts of the world on behalf of your Anglo masters. So, MBS was won over to the Chinese argument that no, it's better to go in a different direction, and a big chunk of the Saudi leadership and intelligentsia were won over to that, UAE as well. And then more recently, China came in and got a resolution. They somehow got Hamas and Fatah from the West Bank and Gaza to start actually harmonizing and getting over all of their past grievances, which is a vital precondition for any type of peace process. There's a lot of Gordian knots on Gordian knots that are preventing any type of viable peace from happening. So the Chinese have been systematically, I think the Russians have been working and helping. I think the Iranians probably have been playing a role to help untie these Gordian knots. And it seems as though Ismail Haniyeh was, I think, supportive of that shifting of the gears from whatever it was he thought he was doing last year to all of a sudden realizing that it's better to change your paradigm, the way Yitzhak Rabin had said, the future belongs to those who have the courage to change their axioms, right as he was signing the Oslo Accords. That was a big deal because this guy did a lot of murder. He did a lot of bad in the 70s and the 80s as an Israeli Defense Forces general. Again, did very bad things, but he did change. People can actually change. And I think that this is where I'm at so far in my analysis of Haniyeh. I think he was probably inclined to change and realize that there's a better strategy, and his elimination was a provocative thing. Because I'm entertaining two hypotheses. One, that there are still saboteurs amongst agencies within the Muslim Brotherhood itself comes out of British Freemasonry. That's an important thing that people need to have that in mind. Going back to Al-Banna, and even before that to the creator of Salafism as well, which fed into the creation of later on Wahhabis, or not later on, but the creation of the Muslim Brotherhood. But Al-Din Al-Afghani, Jamal Abdin Al-Afghani, was himself, he was a Persian Gnostic, friend of Madame Blavatsky, and a variety of occultists. He was a member of the Brotherhood of Luxor, a secret brotherhood in Egypt. He was somebody who was, by all intents and purposes, intent on restoring, with Blavatsky and the Theosophists that were regrouping back in the 1870s, 1880s. They were reorganizing the British Empire's grand strategy around this idea of restoring global paganism as part of a one world religion. That was part of what they were all about. And a big chunk of that, or a big component of that, was rebuilding Solomon's Temple, the way that Julian the Apostate had attempted to do in 360 AD. Julian the Apostate being the last emperor that tried to crush Christianity and restore the pagan mystery cults with himself as the god king, sort of the sun god emperor. Napoleon later on tried to recreate the sun god emperor thing. That didn't work out. But this is what they were trying to do, is restore that. And one aspect that's super valuable for them is, again, there's this mythos around Solomon's Temple. And when the oligarchy talks about Solomon's Temple, they're not talking about the Solomon from the Old Testament. They've got a different idea that they're thinking about of the pagan demon, necromancing demonologist, King Solomon, who they perceive as being the great king that oversaw Moloch and Baal and the various child sacrificing deities that animated so much of that land when the first temple was being built up. And there's references to this in the Old Testament regarding Solomon falling into corruption. He had so many wives, and many of them were pagan, and he started worshiping at the pagan altars. And it's seen as a moral lesson of what not to do. However, in the type of books that people like Aleister Crowley, like Charles Warren, who is the head of the Quattuor Coronati Lodge. He's the guy who excavated Solomon's Temple originally in the 1860s, 1870s. He's also the guy that oversaw the Jack the Ripper murders in London, but that's a whole different it's a connected thing. That's a connected thing too, but I'm not going to go there. All that to say, part of that idea that Jamal Abdin al-Afghani was a part of was restoring the human sacrifices and the ancient pagan cults of Moloch, of Baal, of other things, which involved him creating the philosophy of Salafism while he was under the employment of the British East India Company. He was directly working with the leading figures of the British Empire at that same time that he, as a Gnostic pagan, was working with other, pagan Gnostic theosophists, very closely aligned in mystery cults, which also overlaps this agency called the Hashashin, which was a Persian order of assassins that goes back to the Templars. It was created around, and they actually colluded with the Templars, the Knights of Solomon's Temple, right? Which had their base underneath in Mount Moria, underneath the Dome of the Rock. That was, or actually, I think it was Solomon's Stables, which is where they had their base of operations in the caves. And they were overseeing the Crusades, the infinite bloodbath of centuries of religious war between Christians and Muslims. Now, here's two ironies that I'm trying to hold together in my mind at the same time, right? You've got the creator of radical religious fundamentalist Islamicism, that gave rise to the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, that itself created Hamas, but had all of these weird branches working always as proxies for Anglo-American intelligence throughout the 20th century, and to this very day. That's where ISIS comes out of. That guy created a hard radical religious fundamentalist grouping that kills mostly Muslims who don't agree with their highly rigid interpretation of the Quran. So what's up with that? Okay, that's one thing. It has a lot to do with a big joke that most people are not allowed to be in on. And the other thing is that, as I mentioned, you have these Gnostic mystery cults that goes back to, like, the Hashashin were nominally Muslim, but they were working with nominally Christian Templars, the Knights of Solomon's Temple. They were colluding together, and this is recognized. Neither one of them was Muslim or Christian. The Templars were executed because they were caught worshiping Baphomet, a pagan deity, and doing other things too. And in fact, the Knights Templar were a covert Mithraic cult that was seeded after Mithra was banned from Christendom at the end point of the Roman Empire. Mithra was banned. It was a warrior cult of men only, legionnaires and Praetorian Guard. Everybody was a member of the Mithra cult. They worshipped in underground caverns. Their symbol was the bull getting its head cut off, with Mithra, the deity, looking over it, Helios, the sun, as his master. This is what Julian the Apostate called himself, the reincarnation of Helios, the solar deity. And the idea was to deploy your mercenary mystic warriors with grades of initiation to do your bidding. And they would be just fanatically driven, brainwashed MK Ultra types who would go off with religious fervor into wars that they didn't think that they needed to even understand, because they were being directed by a higher authority of the sun god. They were not Christian ever. They were always seated as a pseudo-Christian Mithraic agency that was working with a pseudo-Islamic mystical drug agency, and it's called the Order of the Hashashins, the assassins, because they went into drug ecstasy states. They did hypnotic induction of themselves using hash, mystic drugs, as part of their ritual self-brainwashing before they would go in and then murder mostly the Hashashins, Muslim leaders who were trying to find peace between the Christian world and the Muslim world after the Crusades had been launched. Sometimes they would kill Christian leaders. Sometimes the Templars would kill Christian leaders, and sometimes they would kill Muslim leaders. But if you look at who they would kill, it was typically people who, like Yitzhak Rabin and Arafat, were trying to resolve the Clash of Civilizations program. So they were always working with this religious fanatical idea that you needed a purgative violence to cleanse the earth of the old ways and restore the older ways, which was like the recreation, the revenge of paganism against the monotheistic, atrocities that overturned the old order of the pagan rituals that animated the entire universe, or the entirety of the world at a certain point. And they've never forgiven authentic Christians or authentic Jews or authentic Muslims. They've never forgiven them because inside of the Old Testament, you have the clearest denunciation of child sacrifice in the book of Kings, Chronicles, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. There's so many denunciations of child sacrifice in Moloch and Baal. And the emphasis on the idea that there is only one God. We can't tolerate all of these gods. There's one God, one creator with moral demands, moral expectations. That concept is incompatible with any type of society managed by an oligarchy. And then it was reemphasized by Christianity with the idea that, no, really, Christ now died. We don't need to have any more people being sacrificed. That was the last sacrifice. That's it. It's over. Right? No more of that. So if you look at things like the Olympics, again, today, it sounds like a segue, but it's not. Because who did they have carrying the torches, right, at the Olympics? You had this weird character from Assassin's Creed, the video game, who is a real-life Hashashin that they had as the theme, carrying the torch. And then you had Snoop Dogg. And what was Snoop Dogg wearing to the Olympics? What was on his chain, right? On his necklace was Baphomet. They had this guy. I don't know what the hell Snoop Dogg's story is. It's weird. He just jumps from like Nation of Islam, which is a UFO cult masquerading as Islamic, into evangelical Christian to, I mean, he's bouncing around. I don't know what he signed into or signed off onto, right? But he's devoted to something strange. He's on a strange path in life. And whatever the case may be, they got him with the Baphomet, thing on his necklace at the Olympics, as I think a little tip of the hat to the Templars, as you have the Hashashin with his torch, carrying the torch, with this whole collusion. So I think that they have been gunning for creating something really bad. And again, also at the Olympics too, you had the decapitated bull right there beside the Olympic logo, right at the opening ceremonies. There was a decapitated bull, which is again a very clear reference to the cult of Mithra, which was all about decapitating the bull, as well as another cult. So the Solomon Temple thing, like I said, you read the literature of a lot of these high-level Masons. You read Charles Warren, you read Sir Richard Burton, who inspired Aleister Crowley. You read Aleister Crowley. All of these creatures who are working with Blavatsky, working with the Jamal Abdin al-Afghani, they view Solomon's Temple as the symbol for a global mystery cult revival, and part of the ritual purge that they feel like they need to do, I believe, is on the one hand, try to persuade the world's Jews to go and live in the desert. That was part of the mission that all of these figures that I'm mentioning were big into. That's partly why they were also behind the growth of Nazism. Like, you wonder where the Eastern symbolism within the Nazi paraphernalia comes from. It comes from the Theosophists directly, and the German branch of the Theosophists that was bringing in Arianism, as a pseudoscience, the idea of the Aryan super race that is in Tibet and in India, and they were trying to create this idea that there are these superhuman beings that are more. Everybody else evolved from Darwinian monkeys. That was part of what the Blavatsky and the Nazis believed, that the forces of Darwinian evolution from monkeys applies to the yellow people, the brown people, but the high Aryans, no, they actually come from spirit being avatars that seeded this higher, beautiful people of blonde hair and blue eyes, and of which Hitler had neither, nor did Blavatsky, which is ironic. But they then used that racist crap and they called it science, and they used a bunch of symbology from Eastern mysticism and stuff to create this new thing. Now, part of what Hitler was doing was trying to get all of the Jews to go into the desert to create a special little zone for these people. Doesn't mean that he respected the Jews, but he definitely wanted to put them all there as part of a larger design. And things like the Protocols of Zion was being promoted by these theosophists to basically terrorize the Jews of Europe in the 1890s, 1900s, to make it very uncomfortable for them in Europe or in Russia, so that they would feel like they just wanted to leave Europe. And it was made very accessible for them to go and like live in the desert. But they didn't want, it was a hard sell. Most Jews didn't want to leave Europe. It was, that's where they lived for centuries. Why would they want to leave? So they had to be terrorized. Some of them had to be brought into the higher magic trick at play, So Theodor Herzl, others were, I think, brought into the higher magic trick. A lot of them were Kabbalists, not real Jews, people who believe in the pagan spoken, the oral tradition passed down vocally from Moses, but that's not written down. It's only for an esoteric inner elite. These Kabbalists also, I think, are very closely aligned with people like Al-Afghani or the Gnostic, modern Templars. And by the way, the SS were known as the New Templars. So Goering, Himmler, that was the New Templar order, was the inner SS. That's where the black sun of the occult comes from. Right? That's what's behind the maintenance of Banderites and fourth generation Nazis in Ukraine today, or in Georgia today, that they're still incubating around this idea. And this is where I think we get a lot of collusion between the worst elements within controlling the Israeli state as well as Ukraine. There's this weird Nazi, Israeli collusion happening, which you wouldn't expect to see, but it's there. Just like there was fanatical Islamic Hashashin and Templar Christians colluding together, which you wouldn't expect, but it's all over the place. So that's sort of what my concern is right now, is like you've got these deep state occultists embedded with influence within Hamas, within Israel, probably within Iran as well. There's a deep state aspect of this occult agency still there. So to what degree they have influence is uncertain to me. I do think that there are adults in the room who are very wise and have been able to maneuver things in a way that has created a very serious hope for a durable peace on this earth, especially with Russia, China, a lot of sane people in Iran, within Palestine and elsewhere, who are really good. But then you've got this other thing, which is good at lighting fires. I don't know personally if that other thing murdered Ismail Haniyeh. I don't know if it really was Anglo-Israelis, as I think most is the consensus amongst the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranian government. They're currently saying they've identified this as an American-Israel operation, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it was. I mean, I'm open to the hypothesis that he was also eliminated by something that wanted to rekindle the fires of this war within this Muslim Brotherhood connected operation embedded, or that still has activity within or influence within Iran. I can't dismiss that hypothesis is what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to say that that's what it is. I'm inclined to say it really was an American-Israeli attack to kill him and provoke a retaliation. They want to provoke. People like Lindsey Graham want to provoke a provocation. They've wanted one for a long time in order to have the justification to go in there and do what they've wanted to do for decades. But I can't say that that I'm 100% on that either. That's just where I tend to lean towards that hypothesis. But there's the other one too. They're both kind of bad. So,
well, isn't it ironic that the same man who incited the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin is the same man that assassinated Haniyeh and the other figures that have been assassinated over the past few days? Isn't it ironic?
It's very ironic if it's true. Yeah.
So
but the other thing too is that Yitzhak Bibi Netanyahu as well has there's a video of him and an old Kabbalistic rabbi who's very influential in Israel, and my co-host for a show that I do every week, Gordon showed me this video where he's being chastised to that he's not moving fast enough to set the stage for the Messiah, to incarnate or something, and he has to move faster. And Benjamin Netanyahu is like a little puppy saying, "Yes, I will work harder." Yes, and it's clear what this old creepy Zionist or like Kabbalist guy is pushing for. So they're operating on this eschatological framework and timeline around this presumed promise to have the Messiah incarnate for the first time. Some of the worst elements of the Christian pseudo Christian cults that are also Christian Zionists that were built up mostly in the 19th century. They're also into the idea of needing to help God along by bringing in the promised end times so that the Messiah can come back the second time. And then you got this weird thing with the Mahdi as well. So there's a similar analog within some of the eschatological mythologies in the Islamic matrix that also involve the incarnation of the Mahdi at the end times, which certain weak-minded fanatics easily get persuaded, well, maybe we should help that process out if it's forecasted that we need some global conflagration and spillage of global blood in order for the Mahdi to come. Maybe we should be helping that process of spillage of blood to do the good, right? And it gets you into this weird Manichaean dualism of, well, I have to do evil to do good. Like it gets you in a bad headspace. But that's a thing. That's a thing in play too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to quote something. There's an article on Sputnik, whichever one you want to call it. And it says Iran's intelligence minister says Israel killed Haniyeh after receiving okay from U.S. Israel killed the political head of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, after receiving green light from the United States intelligence minister Ismail Khatib said on Friday. The cowardly assassination of the head of the Hamas Politburo, Ismail Haniyeh, committed by Israeli usurpers who received the green light from the United States, once again showed the brutality of the Israeli regime. I want to stop right there. Because what do you think the retaliation will be? And because Iran has to retaliate, and they have to do it in a way that that is different from the way they did last time, because they coordinated the last attack with the West. This one has to be an attack that that satisfies the Iranian people and the so-called resistance. What do you think about? What do you think will happen?
I wish they wouldn't. I wish they would hold back. I mean, they've been getting provocative assassinations for a long time by the Israelis. Like dozens and dozens of scientists, of leading generals have been assassinated for a long time. Civilians as well as military active and politicians. They've had a lot. They've withheld quite a bit. They haven't fallen into the trap of doing anything too stupid. And like you said, it's been very thought through. Every retaliation. When Soleimani was murdered, there was a clear thought through negotiated retaliation on an American base that was given. There's four notice given to remove military personnel from that base that would be struck, and it was basically put aside. Same thing for the Iron Dome was demonstrated to be a giant fraud when Iran conducted a retaliation months ago, but it was again very pre-planned in a sense. There was a certain amount of coordination with the Americans. I have no idea what I'm not qualified at all to say what kind of retaliation I expect to see from Iran. I just don't know, man. What do you think?
I think they will hit, and I think they will hit back hard, because if we look at the situation as you stated, over the years and decades, scholars, scientists, officials, and military men and women have been assassinated by the United States, the UK, France, and Israel. And this has been taking place over decades. With the assassination of General Soleimani. I think it lifted to another level because this man was he was tagged as being the next Ayatollah, and he was the second most powerful person in Iran. And Israel struck back, but it was a coordinated. I mean, Iran struck back, but it was a coordinated strike back, and it was to demonstrate that they will hit back. And now we go in the escalation with the embassy. I think that was a step too far. See, you can calculate things, right? But once you get that genie out the bottle, it's hard as hell to put it back in. You can't control the different avenues that these things go down. You know, you may have all kind of plans or whatever, but I think Israel has been stepping over everybody's red line, flaunting international law, spitting in the face of all of the nations. And I believe that this right here, with the assassination of the leader of Hamas, if it had been in Lebanon or if it had been in Syria, that would have been something different. But they did it not too far from the residence of the president of Iran, and they did it the day that he was being inaugurated, and they did it in Tehran. There must be some type of massive retaliation. They cannot, because they have an audience that they have to deal with also. And the temperature, from what I gather from a few people, the temperature is that the people are demanding retaliation. This was a spit in the face to Iran. Yeah,
I get that sense too. That's the dangerous thing right now. Is, you know, if this is the trap. If they allow themselves to react with this type of righteous revenge at this moment, and they have every reason to feel the righteous need for revenge. They have every right. They've been so wronged. The Arabs living in the region have been so wronged for so long, and just abuse after abuse after abuse. It's heavy. It weighs you down, and it creates a pressure cooker that demands action. However, Israel wants it. They want, that's exactly what they want. The freaks inside of the U.S. military industrial complex want that. These end times cultists want this. So this is what got us into ultimately the Crusades didn't have nuclear weapons. Today we've got a new Crusades with nuclear weapons, and I'm not at ease when I think about the type of pressure that many people in the Islamic world are feeling and putting on the government of Iran or Hezbollah or others to do something and put Israel in their place. It's just, like I said, it can go just so bad so quickly, and at that point things will accelerate beyond any ability to negotiate or talk through a peace. And you can find ourselves, chain reaction wise, just at a major confrontation between Russia and China and the United States, even if this spirals in a certain direction. So yeah.
But let me stop you right there. And let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
Why should Iran continue to take humiliation and continue to take the assassination of scholars and leaders and dignitaries and affront to its sovereignty to placate America and Israel because they're acting crazy and they have nuclear weapons? Why should the onus be on the victim not to retaliate and there's no responsibility for the aggressor to stop its aggression?
I agree with you. It's just, I guess the stakes right now are all humanity as we know it is about to go into a prolonged dark age for probably several centuries, if not longer. We could feasibly see in a very real way the elimination of upwards of 95% of the world population as we know it, and the eraser. As that happens, all of the civilizational forces of the world that have been around for thousands of years, many of them could be completely wiped out of existence. So for me, it's just the stakes are so high, like all of humanity might be literally wiped out. So I agree with you, but at the same time, it's just we only have small pathways out of this thing that are getting smaller and one of them involves, or the big part is what the BRICS nations, and especially China and Russia together, and other collaborators have been able to bring online. And Iran's played a very important role in that alliance for building a new order founded upon natural law. Like, actually the laws of God's creation, have to shape how we decide what our political, economic decisions and laws are going to be on Earth. And so that's pretty in harmony with, like, what they've been able to do is miraculously good and based upon something which will redeem humanity in the long run. We've never seen anything like it. This level of collaboration amongst civilizational states with this pretty good understanding of the nature of the enemy, how it sets traps, what our common humanity is under a win-win philosophy that transcends Hobbesianism. We've never seen this type of thing occur with this level of influence ever in history. So this is the greatest opportunity we have to really destroy the systems and the culture of oligarchy, this closed oligarchy that has been maintaining these mystery cults with these inner families going back to ancient Rome and even before that. Some of them actually, I think, do go back continuously to Babylon even. It's not all European. But it's an oligarchy. It's a satanic thing that's been maintaining a continuity, an unbroken continuity for thousands of years that we've never been able to actually do something about it until now. So I just think that my fear is that if they give in if they actually fight back the way that some are proposing right now, a trap could be triggered that will undo all of that potential and eliminate humanity. So that's my big concern.
I sympathize, and I have similar concerns, but I want to pose something to you. Have you ever received a gift? You asked your mom growing up that, hey, I want this. Mom, I'll do anything for this. I want this. And when you get it, it's not what you wanted, and it's not what you thought it was, right? Have you ever had that happen? Okay. Well,
I can identify
when we talk about when we talk about the oligarchs, and we talk about Israel, and we talk about the United States and what they want, they believe that they want this, but Iran cannot continue to suffer to placate the United States and Israel. That's with anybody. If I'm constantly slapping you in the face, I'm constantly barging in on your home, I'm constantly disrespecting your wife and your children. I don't care how peaceful you are and how you are trying to avoid conflict. The man in you will be forced to stand up and defend your rights, defend your freedom, defend your children, defend your wife, defend your household. If not, you're not worth the salt that leavens bread. So my thing is, sometimes the empire wants something, and when they get it, it's not what they thought it was. And let me give you a prime example. They wanted Ukraine, and they wanted Ukraine to fight Russia because they thought that they could use Ukraine to subjugate Russia and to break Russia, because they thought that Russia was a has-been power. And now they got what they wanted, and now it's a different story because it did not pan out the way they wanted it to pan out. And I'm saying that I sympathize and I understand your viewpoint, but what I'm saying is that all of the onus cannot always be on the victim. I'm saying that Iran has done its best to avoid conflict with the United States since the overthrow of not the Shah, but since the overthrow of Mossadegh, when the United States overthrew the democratically elected leader of Iran. So they have been avoiding the traps. Now there comes a inflection point. There comes a point where, listen, you continue to ignore my national security interests, so I have to act. When America's interests are ignored, she acts. When NATO's interests are ignored, they act, and then they justify their action. But with Iran, Russia, and China, the West, the mentality is they must avoid conflict. But they're not the ones that are pushing the conflict. They have been avoiding the conflict, And so they have been pushed in a corner. And
Go ahead. Nah, man. Look, it's entirely possible that a mass world war might be necessary at the end of the day. Maybe we need that. I don't think that this would be just an Iran versus if Iran, depending on how they respond, but if they respond in a certain, if they respond unwisely, like they could quickly escalate to a world war, with America jumping right on board fully, and other nations being brought in through NATO as well, which would very quickly activate Russia's participation, I would say, and probably China and other countries aligned with them. So I can't say we don't need that, but I don't think I'm trying to think like a Chinese statesman. Like that's sort of I'm a dude sitting, in Canada, trying to make sense of things, watching podcasts and reading stuff and try to like make sense out of the insanity, right? And I'm trying to put my head into the vicarious position of somebody who's in a position of stately influence, who's responsible for eliminating like the survival of the human species. So I'm trying to put myself into a Xi Jinping mindset, or a Wang Yi, or like one of these high level Confucian scholars, or a Lavrov. And I'm trying to think, how are they thinking strategically about this? How would they be reacting to our conversation? My position is being informed by that exercise I'm taking. I don't think that I think that Iran is in a pretty good place despite all of the abuses. They've continued to excel pretty miraculously and wisely. They've been growing, building up their relationships, building up their economy, building up a lot of really good stuff. And they're not currently themselves. They haven't been damaged. Kind of like Russia. They've taken a bad situation and made it really work for them. In the case, I'm thinking of Egypt, of El-Sisi, and I mean, here's a guy too who's got a giant fifth column, a deep state inside of Egypt that's still run by the Muslim Brotherhood, still there. It didn't go away after Morsi was taken down. The Muslim Brotherhood is still a factor in managing the deep state. Erdogan, you still have the Fethullah Gulen deep state still active inside of Turkey. It didn't get completely purged. It's still an influence. It's a factor he has to still navigate with. And it has been gamed out, the idea of getting all of the Palestinians who have suffered so much abuse in Gaza to just get them out and get them into Egypt, which would then involve or quickly set the stage for the next level of the greater Israel trap as well, which would be to send some rockets in from Egypt that would justify a new invasion of Egypt, because greater Israel maps involve a big chunk of Egypt all the way up through the Suez Canal. That would be part of Israel's possessions, a third of Saudi Arabia. And again, the Muslim Brotherhood is still, the Wahhabite faction that got taken down in 2017 in Saudi Arabia, the Prince Bandar bin Sultan networks. A lot of them got taken down, but a lot of them are still influential. They're still waiting to take back control over MBS. But they're still there. They're still working with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. They're still working with the similar networks in Turkey and other countries. So it's a new Babylon that they want to create on the one level. On the other level, it's a geopolitical disaster. It's so hard. I mean, there's so many. You're in the most precarious position to navigate through this level of complexity, on top of the religious cultism that wants to bring about an end times that has operatives within the Muslim world, Christian world, Jewish world alike, who are working together. So China's provided the only gateway out of it that I could see as a viable solution with the Belt and Road Initiative and this alternative system that can float. If that's sabotage, we're doomed for a long time. Like centuries and centuries will be gone as a species.
Let me advance something to you. America is not the power that she used to be. The West, they're not the power that they used to be. Economically, they're in a dire situation, and they're fighting like hell to try to maintain dollar hegemony. This is why you see all of the provocations. This is why you see all of the covert operations, the color revolutions, because at home the system is bare. They have no reserves. They have no manufacturing capacity. They're in debt up to their eyeball. Just the interest on the debt has ballooned to $1 trillion. We just saw the debt, the so-called quote unquote official debt, go up to $35 trillion. This is unsustainable. And this is why you see the go ahead with assassinations. America is allowing Israel to have all this leeway. The UK is allowed, because the UK still pulls strings in the United States too. A lot of people have it wrong when they think that the UK has no say in it, but that is the mother of the United States, and she still has some say. What I'm trying to say is that with all of what America believes that she is, when you pull the clothes up, you'll find that the emperor is naked. And America, she cannot superimpose her position on everybody. Her only trump card that she has is her nuclear weapons. Okay. And say for instance, and she's acting like a wild beast. And she's allowing Israel to act like a wild beast. That's her trump card. Nuclear weapons. Economically, she cannot compete with China. Period.
No.
Politically, she's lost her position globally because nobody is respected. And look at this circus of the political system here in America. Militarily, Russia is her equal or has surpassed her, and China has caught up with her. So she no longer dominates the global sphere of geopolitics anymore. So now when we look at Iran is the regional superpower. This was admitted by the previous war secretary of the United States and the current war secretary of the United States, that Iran is the regional superpower. How much disgrace and how much spit in the face must Iran take? Why does China have to bow its head to the United States to keep from going into a third world war? Why must Russia kowtow to the United States to keep from going into a world war? My thing is this: sometimes that is what it takes. If war is what you want, hey, I've been trying to avoid it, but I cannot allow you to assassinate my citizens. If I allow that to happen, or if I allow you to assassinate guests in my capital, then I am not a leader, and I should be removed from the leadership. The main goal of a leader of a nation is to secure the interests of his nation and to protect the security of its people and the guests that come to that nation. When you do not do that or cannot do that, then you should step down and let another person do it. And if that means war with the aggressor, so be it. So be it. So be it.
Yeah, but if millions of Iranian citizens have to get murdered in the context of that war, doesn't that kind of undo the protection, the ideal of protecting the lives of your citizens?
Listen, we'll look at the whole situation of the West Asia or Middle Eastern, North African region, okay? And I akin it to something like in science and biology. We have an unnatural disease that has infected the body of West Asia. Science tells us that either we get rid of that disease or the disease kills the host body, right? And the way, what do you do to get rid of the disease? You fight that disease, or else the disease kills you. So now we know that it's American and Zionistic imperialism that has infected that region. America has more bases in the region than the nations in the region. And if they do not do anything to secure their own interests in their neighborhood, and even if that means the loss of life, sometimes blood has to be shed. Sometimes life has to be lost in order to secure. So what if 1,000 people die for the security of 80 million people?
I said millions. I said millions of people dying. Okay. I agree. Sometimes wars have to be fought. I'm not a pacifist, right? Like I agree. Sometimes you got to fight a war. I'm not saying that you don't. Sometimes there's just wars. I agree. But I was given the scenario of millions of Iranian citizens, not even thousands. And
let's say 10 million die. What is that? Say for instance, 10 million Iranians die.
Yeah.
That would be a price to pay to secure the lives and the future of 80 more million Iranians. Because right now, there's no security for any Iranians because the United States has them ringed with bases. The United States is all in the waterways. The United States is trying to control with sanctions the economy. They're killing hundreds of thousands of Iranians on a yearly basis with sanctions. So, I mean, sometimes to free your people, you have to engage in lawsuits. Look what Russia has done in Ukraine. Russia knew that they were going to endure losses, but they had to commit troops to the battlefront and be hardened and say, you know what, we know we're going to lose these troops, but for the motherland, to secure the entirety of Russia, we have to take those losses. And I'm saying, and I'm not advocating war. I told you I'm playing devil's advocate right now.
Yeah.
For Iran, how much more must Iran take? It has been taking it since the 50s with the United States. How much more? And think about from the 50s to today, they've lost millions of lives with sanctions, with wars. Look what happened with the U.S. imposed, UK imposed Iran-Iraq war. Look at what happened over the years with the assassination and the covert operations that take place across Iran. You have to think of the totality of it, and not just a few.
Yes. You made it. There was a meme that you've probably seen already, featuring Xi Jinping, and the quote or the meme says something to the effect that U.S. intelligence just discovered new strategy for defeating America by China. Sit back and watch America collapse. I think we can both agree that there is a collapse. The U.S. is a hollow shell on the verge of a complete collapse, as is the entire Western transatlantic banking system. They do have a little bit of muscle flexing power with their nuclear submarines, and maybe some there is a secret science program too that's been maintained since the Manhattan Project. That's also a factor I try to keep in mind, but it's kind of like what I was talking about with the occult stuff. There's only so much I can know. I kind of have to just infer, but it's a factor regarding evidence of directed energy beams, energy weapons that were employed in Hawaii, as I think one message to China and to some of the perceived enemies of the United States. So it had a twofold effect. On the one hand, of clearing Lahaina of the people living there in order for multi-billionaires like Zuckerberg and others to build a fancy new set of villas with a bit of a BlackRock oversight operation. They kind of have the same type of model that they're looking at for the Gaza or for rebuilding, a World Economic Forum model city, model nation under in Ukraine. So you did have what seems to be directed energy beams and that are tied to a secret science aspect of the military industrial system, which we don't get to a lot of this stuff openly. So there are these things. We also have like next generation tech on the Russian China side too. Hypersonic missiles, things that can fly around the Earth's atmosphere like 30 times before striking on target. Like there's incredibly advanced underwater drones that are more advanced than people realize, electromagnetic weaponry, pulsed beam weapons that are also a factor that's been developed for decades on both sides. So there's all of these. What we're being told is the military technology in play is not really what it is on both sides. So there's these additional factors too that I'm always just kind of like chewing on, though I don't know how to swallow it. I just know I'm chewing on it. So what if though? What if the Russia and China understand that the U.S. is running out of time? The West as a whole is going to collapse. At that point, why would they want to like run into something that could feasibly cause millions and millions, or not billions, of dead citizens around the world by satisfying that feeling of revenge now, when they could just continue to do what they've been doing and not fall into that trap and let the thing collapse in itself and demonstrate its own, it's its own worst enemy without picking the fight. What about that?
Well, check this out. And I get you. Yeah. And I've processed that position that you said. I've processed that.
Okay.
But I want everybody to understand that America and the UK will not willingly allow their system to collapse. I want you to think about this. They picked a fight with Russia on Russia's border. Russia is the largest nuclear power on the face of the planet. That does not dissuade them from doing that. They will not go just quietly into the night. They will fight like hell. They have a doctrine, the MAD doctrine, mutually assured destruction, right? That means that, and if you read some of the writings about the MAD doctrine, they are saying that they will not allow any nation to supplant the United States, and they are prepared to go to nuclear war, Armageddon with that. And there was a writing. I'm trying to think. I was reading some of the works from the Cold War, in the 50s and the 60s and stuff, and especially during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the United States, almost went to nuclear war with Russia. And they said that had they gone to nuclear war with Russia, they would have nuked China too. China had nothing to do with the situation, but they did not want to allow China to be in a position to dominate if Russia and the United States went into a nuclear war. That is the thinking of these people. And I think a lot of scholars and I think a lot of the best thinkers in the West just chalk this up and push it to the side. These people are not going to go quietly into the night and allow the so-called rules-based international order to collapse. Why? Because what you said earlier on in our show, families are connected and they go back centuries. And if this were to collapse, then their influence, their power, and their wealth would go with them. And they don't want to be on the same level with everybody else. They feel that it's their right to rule, it's their right to be wealthy, it's their right to have influence. And if they can't have that, to hell with everybody. And to prove that's their thinking, they came out with a paper and they were stating that the United States, and everybody knows this, that the United States has enough weapons to destroy the world 30 times over. Why the hell would you even build that many weapons? You can't destroy it nothing but one time. So why would you make that unless you have a plan that if my policies are not initiated, if I can't dominate, to hell with everybody?
It's a viciously evil, self-destructive ideology that's influencing top-down real serious decisions by a big part of the U.S. establishment and broader Anglo-American establishment, I would say. Agreed. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I just, like I said, it's for me. I pay a lot of attention to this this occult aspect of things, which for me, that's sort of what rubs me. It makes it difficult for me to comment on such matters because a big chunk of these occultists that represent the old Babylonian priesthood and high power structures, which have penetrations in the Arabic world as well, and they're it's a supranational shadow entity thing. It's everywhere. Like it's got tentacles. It does really want that purgative violence to reduce the world population to much less than 1 billion people under a highly superstitious dark age type of environment. I just don't know if that type of doing anything which plays into that outcome that they want, which involves a global conflagration, can possibly result in them not winning. I just don't necessarily see how. I agree that they would rather not. They would rather do it in a different way. Like the oligarchy would rather slower attrition. They want to blow out the system. Like as soon as they killed John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Fred Hampton, like they did a mass purge of anybody who had moral qualified leadership in America to organize people in a better way and revive the better traditions of Western civilization. They got rid of them. You had this Malthusian takeover. It was a coup completely, right? By the time the 70s were rolling around, the Trilateral Commission, David Rockefeller, they were all depopulation fanatics. Maurice Strong, Zbigniew, Henry Kissinger, they were all depopulation fanatics. And they took over and they created a time bomb. So they set into motion a trigger that would blow out the US dollar by turning it into a bubble. That's what they've always done, is they turn the US economy into a giant casino and a bubble that would be tied to ever increasing rates of debt that would eventually be defaulted upon, and resulting in all of this nominal money built up on the speculative activity of the dollar as being non-existent, kind of like what they did to blow out the economy in the Great Depression in 29. They did this same thing, but bigger with modern technology. And their idea was that everybody was supposed to be in globalization. We're all supposed to be in the same building when they detonated the building, and Russia and China and everybody was supposed to be in that building so that they could detonate it in a controlled demolition and then rebuild, offer the solution as a new world order as the outcome. Now, I don't think that they anticipated that you would have countries that would learn how to, that would get a hold of their better ancient traditions, apply it, and then get out of a building and build a better building that wasn't going to detonate. But that's what's happening. So there's a few scenarios in play, like there's factions within the oligarchy, it seems, I'm seeing evidence of it, that are realizing that they've overplayed their hand and that are trying to sort of set the stage for some form of a longer game to live to fight another day and destroy the world in a few generations. And I think from this grouping, I see the handlers of people like, I'll just say it, Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs is extremely high level. Like, this guy he taught at the London School of Economics and went through the history of transhumanism, cybernetics in a very coherent way, straight from he's one of the few people I've ever seen who understands and can teach those Fabian society elites for the next generation what is the direct continuity between Bertrand Russell's Principia Mathematica and the formation of cybernetics under Bertrand Russell's student Norbert Wiener, the application of it to government and control mechanisms of NATO, of the OECD. He could do he does it. He knows it. That's what that's what was educating him. He's also a major believer in Fabian Keynesianism, in the idea of world government, in the idea of closed system thinking, that we need a Green New Deal, a green economy founded upon stasis. So he's a believer in all these things. And this is what informed him when he was working with the IMF to oversee the creation of a new oligarchical elite. Now, he'll say otherwise. He says in his interviews today that, I didn't know, I was naive, but now I mean well. And I'm sure he is genuine in that he's positioning, he's representing a position within the oligarchy that's trying to create an off-ramp for themselves. And again, not because they're honest, they just realize that nuclear war would not be in their benefit. I support that faction. I'm supportive of that faction of the oligarchies. It's like the oligarchy, the faction, to get a parallel of it, is Great Britain, 1936, where there was a decision, there's a battle within the British Empire, the highest echelons of global power, over whether they would continue to support their Hitler machinery and the Nazi king, Edward VIII, or whether they would abort the Hitler plan because it was becoming too unwieldy. It was going to challenge their own hegemony, and try to live to fight another day. Infiltrate the United States more slowly, think a bit more transgenerational, instead of trying to get that satisfaction now of consolidating a new world order the way that they had been trying to do since World War I, which involved the cultivation of Nazism, fascism as the miracle solutions to the Great Depressions that they were orchestrating. So there was a faction fight within the oligarchy. Some wanted to continue to go with their Hitler plan, even if Hitler wasn't acting the way they'd anticipated. They were like, still, okay, let's just take the hit and go with it. We put a lot into it. That was the faction supporting King Edward the Eighth, and Neville Chamberlain and Lloyd George, the Milner group. And then you had the other faction that was like, no, they weren't good people, this other faction, but they were like, no, let's put it down. Let's try to beg the United States to come in and save us. Let's try to, we'll fight another day. We'll get a global one world empire under the city of London in the future. and that they did that. So I'm seeing that sort of the faction. I don't know how influential this faction within the oligarchy is representing Sachs. I see it possibly also having some influence over Elon Musk. Like, I don't see Elon as his own man at all.
No, he's not. He's not.
No. You know, but he was deployed to make some, as an emissary, to make some accolades to China, to make some offers that China didn't accept. But, you know, there was an obvious intent. There's emissaries representing the West that have been sent over to the Chinese saying, let's renegotiate this. I know we, you know, the plan didn't quite turn out in your favor of what Kissinger negotiated in the 70s. Let's go back to the drawing board and you'll benefit again. Come on. And they're trying to seduce the Chinese. They're trying to flatter them as well to try to, like, win them over to the idea that maybe they can get back in the New World Order game. They're not going to win. They're not going to be successful, but they seem to not be pushing necessarily or desirous of that total nuclear war orientation. That being said, they might feel at a certain point, if nothing else works, that maybe all they can do is unleash the nuclear warheads. Maybe they will feel that. And at that point, you gotta react accordingly. You know, Putin just said he's prepared to use, and he would. Any country, if they're attacked by nuclear warheads, they have to retaliate with everything that they've got, every technology known and unknown. They have to use in response, which is, again, not a comforting thought.
You know, the nukes, it hangs over everybody's head. And I say this to a lot of people, and this is not in the religious sense, but it is in the religious sense. We often look at the United States as the preeminent power, and we look at the Western world as the preeminent power. But I want to advance a thought to everybody right here and right now on this platform. America may be powerful, the West may be powerful, but God is all powerful. And there is a hidden power behind the scene that is ignored in all of the conversations that go on, as if God does not have the ability to trump what America and the West is doing. And we see it being trumped right now. I mean, look at the situation. Every move that America makes, every move that the West makes, when they think they can do this, I'm going to go right, they wind up turning left. All of their plans are falling apart, all of them. And right now they're just throwing mud or excrement up against the wall to see if it'll stick, to buy them just a little time. I want to play this clip for you, Matthew, before we bring the show to an end. I want to play this clip for you. This is from about 2014, if I'm not mistaken, 20 something around that area. And this is from the man who coined the phrase full spectrum dominance. This is from F. William Engdahl. And he tells you back then the state of America and the Western world. And as he talks about this, he tells us that the situation has become so dire with America that not even Jesus Christ himself can reverse the collapse of America. And this is what I'm trying to convey to the people, that America, her trump card, she can't bribe China. China has the largest economy, and it was the largest economy from 2014 up to this very day in purchasing power parity. The metrics that really matter, according to the CIA and the IMF, the purchasing power parity, and it trumps what the United States has. Yep. And if anybody wants to really understand that, I did a show on this about a year and a half ago, and it's called America. We're no longer number one, or something like that. It's about 54 minutes to see, and I used the metrics of the IMF and the CIA and what they said. So I want to play this clip, and I want you to listen close to what Engdahl has said. It's not 4 minutes. It's a little bit over there. It's about 6 minutes or something like that. But I want you to pay close attention to it.
Yeah.
Right. Joining us today is best-selling author and economist William Engdahl. He's been writing on issues of energy, politics and economics for more than 30 years. Thank you for joining us today. Recently, we've seen several American banks beat forecasts and record an increase in profit. So is the worst now over for the world's economy?
this is by no means a sign of the end of the crisis. I estimate that we're perhaps 40% into the losses alone in the U.S. real estate sector. And these banks are, when we talk about the banks, we're talking really about, at most, 7 or 8 huge institutions that are at the center of this crisis, and not tens of thousands of smaller banks in the U.S.
So in your opinion, do you think it's too soon to be optimistic?
It's absolutely too soon to be optimistic in the U.S. The U.S. is the heart of a global problem, the core of the problem. And U.S. financial and banking deregulation since the end of the 1990s is the proximate cause of the problem. And that is a process now that is going to put the U.S. into what I call 10 years of hell. It's going to be worse in some respects than the Great Depression of the 1930s for most Americans. And everything that the current administration and the previous administration have done about the problem is merely going to make it worse for the actual economy.
So now let's shift to Eastern Europe. Now, you've written at great length about the drama that's unfolding there. So could you perhaps paint us a picture about the situation there at the moment, and which countries are most affected?
The problem in Eastern Europe is if you will, a derivative problem of the problem of cheap credit coming out of Wall Street over the last 7 years. And as the Fed lowered its interest rates after 2002, partly to create this real estate bubble and to feed the Wall Street banks' securitization process, the interest rates worldwide came down, the European interest rates and so forth. So banks in Europe were able to borrow money very cheaply and lend it out to Eastern European countries that were in the European Union, like Poland or Hungary or the Czech Republic. I don't see it as the same kind of crisis as the derivatives-driven crisis in the U.S. banks, because there is a real housing deficit after 50 years or so of the controlled economy, command economy, under the Warsaw Pact Soviet Union era. And people do have jobs. This isn't derivative speculation off the books. This is simply normal banking loans. And what the EU governments have done in one form or another is to step in with IMF funds. I'm not a fan of the IMF in any way, but the purpose of the funds was to stabilize the currency so that it doesn't become a speculative target and make the crisis worse. I think for the moment it's quote unquote under control. It doesn't have the leverage potential that the American crisis has.
And Russia is currently in a similar situation, with rumours that many banks will soon go bust if more negotiation doesn't happen with the West sometime soon. So what do you think is the best option available to Russia?
Russia has to, and this is, I think, one thing that the current government and when Vladimir Putin was president, I think he very much tried to do, is to bring the crucial elements of a sovereign nation back under state control. That doesn't say going back to the era of central planning communism, but certainly to control your currency, to control your credit system. These are things that any sovereign nation should rightly have. And in terms of the banking crisis, perhaps there are some banks that would do better if they were nationalized. If the losses are too great, at least nationalized so that they could be then cleaned up from the toxic waste and the bad investments, and that the real economy comes out of this as the healthy factor and not pure financial speculation for the good of a few oligarchs at the expense of the Russian economy and the Russian people.
So how long do you think it's going to take before we see the end of this recession?
The point is, we're at an epochal change. This is something that happens perhaps every 400 or 500 years. This isn't a once-in-a-decade recession that we're living through. And I call it in my new book, which was just released in German, the decline of the American century. This is a terminal decline, as you had with the British Empire after World War I. And it wouldn't matter if Jesus Christ were the President of the United States today. There would be nothing he could do to reverse that decline process. We would almost have to reorganize and start from scratch, because the cancer of this financial system has embedded itself so deeply that they've destroyed industrial technology in the United States. They've outsourced manufacturing over the past 25, 30 years to Asia, to Eastern Europe, all over the world. The American elite has rotted itself from inside out over the past 30, 40 years, since the early 70s. So Europe, including Russia, very much so including Russia, or let's say Eurasia. Eurasia is a vast continent which has every resource man could imagine for anything that we would want to build economically. It has the brain power, it has the scientific talents. We haven't totally destroyed that, as has been the case in the U.S. And that is all we need. It has the raw material. Russia has unlimited technology for unlimited resources of natural gas and oil. The Russian geology is light years ahead of American and Western geology, geophysics, let's say, because it is based on real earth science, real physics, and not on hocus pocus to hide the fact of how much oil the world has. So there is nothing that's lacking. The decision in Western Europe, in the European Union, is for many European elites, I know this from discussions here in Germany in the recent years, they have to make a choice, and they're schizophrenic about that choice right now. Either strengthen the Atlantic Alliance with Washington and go down with the sinking Titanic called the American century, or carefully try to reorient the supertanker called the European Union and build bridges of cooperation with Russia above all, with China above all for economic markets and whatnot.
And what are your thoughts on the US President Barack Obama? Do you think he is the man to control this situation?
No. To my mind, and I said this in print a year before Barack Obama became president, the American power establishment since the time, at least, of Abraham Lincoln, with the possible exception of John Kennedy, has never allowed any candidate to get near the White House who they don't totally control. And that we see that in the case of President Obama. So there is nothing that the Obama administration is doing to rock the boat. He is merely, if you will, a cosmetic change. What do you say? Old wine in new bottles, and that's Barack Obama. He's
boom. So that's a lot to unpack, and the reason I played that is because certain words he said that America is at the core of this decline. She sits at the center of the corruption and everything, and he called it a cancer. And he used the word. He says we are in a terminal decline. And so as he was speaking, I looked it up. Terminal decline is an idiom that means something is getting worse without any chance or possibility of improving. So now, with that definition known, let's say that again. It is an idiom that means something is getting worse without any chance or possibility of improving. So now, you see the connection of the families from centuries ago up to today running everything. Desperation is setting in with them because they realize that this new order, this new system that is being brought online is outside of their power, outside of their influence. And as the dollar tanks, as the euro tanks, as the pound tanks, they lose wealth, influence, power, and position. This is causing them to do what they're doing. And no matter what they do is going, it is going to get worse for them. So now they're hedging their bets. Let me escalate. These are all miscalculations that go way back.
Oh yeah, sure. The thing I really respect Engdahl. His writing is very useful, but it's strange because he's also it seems wiped his mind of something that he once knew when he used to be EIR economics editor back in the 1990s for Executive Intelligence Review. He was for 20 years their economics editor, and he at the time understood and would write about something very important that he no longer talks about. Whether he stopped believing it, I don't know. Which was the subversion of the New World Order by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Roosevelt's activation of Lincoln's program that was constitutional banking that undermined the Anglo-American power structures of the 30s, the 40s, and that was then adopted by Kennedy and revived by Kennedy later on. I don't know why he doesn't talk about that, because it would showcase to Americans what was salvageable, like what made America not suck. Most Americans have been detached from that tradition that they forgot they used to be. And also, like, what makes the oligarchy afraid? Because part of what the oligarchy has been trying to do, I wrote this book series, right, called The Clash of the Two Americas, and it's 4 volumes of this book series, and they're pretty thick books, or a few of them are. And part of what I'm trying to do as a Canadian is understand what the hell is the United States and what is Canada within this context. So I had to do this, and I called it what I called it because I came to identify that the oligarchy they never forgave America for what it did in 1776 by creating a new type of society, right, that had never existed before, even though it wasn't acted upon. The ideals were good, but the actions still fell short way too often, right? But still, the ideals were solid. And it was representing a role model that other nations, Haiti became the world's second republic. A lot of other nations were getting independently minded based on the example of these colonists. And they've always wanted to destroy the United States. That's what the oligarchy was behind the Civil War. It wasn't an indigenously American problem. It was being inflamed by forces running America's fifth colonists, its core treacherous families on both sides of the North and the South alike, that were trying to break up the Union through civil war and then recreate a new empire tied to an allegiance to Great Britain. All of the great presidents who get killed are all fighting this thing, all of them. And I've gone through every single case study of every single president, from William Harrison to JFK to his brother. And when you start appreciating that, there's like a sense that the oligarchy is afraid of something about the United States. They really are afraid of something within the US as this latent, though it's like a really latent memory now, it's like really almost forgotten, but they're still afraid of this potential. And I think that's partially why the Chinese like Trump, and the Russians typically like Trump quite a bit, because for all of Trump's problems and all these things, it's clear that he's the only person in the Republican Party to try to revive the William McKinley Lincoln program. And he's spoken openly attacking his own Republican Party for abandoning Lincoln and McKinley, trying to restore the right to have a protective tariff as a policy measure, which is part of his Agenda 47. The idea of state credit, like the greenbacks as well, that's also part of the Agenda 47 idea of creating massive infrastructure, rebuilding manufacturing, reorganizing a lot of things, which is very different from what the Elon Musk libertarian, Javier Milei type of preachers. They're trying to infiltrate through the Heritage Foundation and other things and contaminate this whole, MAGA movement into a new crusader libertarian empire that revives the Knights of the Golden Circle back from the 19th century KKK days. That Knights of the Golden Circle is the sort of template they want to do, where, there was a plan by the Confederates to have legally mandated free trade. Like, that's part of the Confederate Constitution of the 1860s, was a rejection of all protectionism or national involvement with economics. They legalized anybody. The idea of ever making a slave free was made illegal within their constitution. So if people say, oh, the Confederacy was never, they were going to eventually get rid of slavery down the line, was never true. They actually enshrined it in their constitution that slavery is part of the fabric of their existence. And the other thing was an expansionist empire. They were going to expand and invade Mexico. They were going to then invade Cuba. They were going to invade Venezuela, all of Central America. A big chunk of Colombia was supposed to be part of this. It's called the Golden Circle Empire, with Cuba as the center of this Confederate empire, as an island nation, very similar to the island nation of Great Britain or Japan, that were also being brainwashed to be empires. So that didn't work. Lincoln kept the thing together. That plan didn't work. It also, America was saved by the Russians too. The Russians stepped in and saved the Union back then. So I think that there's this historical dynamic I've identified. I know people within the LaRouche organization today, within this Promethean Political Action Committee today inside the USA, who are fighting to organize the better people around Trump to this more competent historical tradition that's been suppressed. And I think that that's why the Russians, the Chinese, they see that there's something viable if the U.S. can start looking out for itself and not be run by a death cult. And I think that if Trump can stay alive and, reactivate some of the things he was doing in his first term, then that could cause William Engdahl's prediction of a 100% irredeemable America to maybe lose a couple of its percentage points. So because that small unlikely possibility is still a possibility, and there are people fighting, and there's this knowledge, there is this history I've discovered, I have to go with it's redeemable, though unlikely, and thus nuclear war isn't necessary because of that, though it might happen because by statistical probability alone, and maybe in that sense it might be necessary. But there's this small margin is what I'm trying to get at. I'm looking at as a constructive problem solving oriented mind. I really need to focus on what can the U.S. be saved without mass global death, or can it be saved at all? And I would say yes.
Well, Matthew, my colleague, thank you for joining me. And thank you for giving me an hour and 42 minutes, man. I thought we were just going to do an hour, man. You kick butt.
It's a pleasure, man. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. Right? The time flew. It really did.
Thank you, man. Be blessed. I'll contact you later.
All right. Likewise. Bye-bye.
All right. Everybody, thank you. Hit that like button, everybody. Also, subscribe to Matthew. Go to his channel. Go to Twitter. Go help support him in any way you can. Support the channel. Super chat, super thanks. Become a channel member. Become a patron. We're going to have a live stream sometime coming up on the channel members, and we're going to have a live stream coming up soon for the patrons. I really want to thank each and every one of you for joining me on the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, anywhere on God's green earth. This is your platform for education, elevation, and edification. This is the Red Pill Diaries, and I am your host, your brother, and your friend, Rasheed. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart to the depth of my soul for giving me your time. You've given me an hour and 43 minutes. You didn't have to do that. So for that, I am truly humbled by you all sitting here and engaging with us as we converse and try to talk about solutions, try to address problems, try to enlighten people. Thank you all for joining me. Join us on the next episode, and remember to subscribe. And if you have subscribed to this channel, please check your subscription, because we continue to get people unsubscribed without their knowledge. On that note, I want to thank you, and I want to tell you that I love you if you love truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous, and remember to do right by others, not because other people are watching, but because it's the right thing to do. That's what my mom taught me. Hey, Mom, your baby boy loves you more than life. Thank you, everybody. Deuces. We're out of here. Peace.